Redgate!
All right, everyone, thanks for joining us and welcome aboard. My name's Brian Mather and I'm the owner here at Action BI. Quick warning, I don't have a formal IT background. Whilst managing a business in Ireland, I fell in love with SQL and Power BI and Power Pivot originally because of the ability to deliver and share key insights into real business challenges. Action BI was born in 2015 to chase the dream of a new career, making these kinds of insights a reality for organizations around the world. The first order of the day is to say a huge thank you to Zoom for blurring my background. But besides that, a massive shout out to Redgate for sponsoring and for building SQL tools that we absolutely love. And finally, to the team of New Stars for making this happen. It's a real opportunity for some of us to start giving back to what's clearly an awesome community. You may have noticed I've changed the title slightly. I hope you don't mind. From Great Report to Golden Dataset is a little more focused on what I'm trying to outline today and something a little closer to what I hoped I could fit into an hour. There are my contact details, email, blog, and BV Mather at Twitter if you want to get a hold of me. So what to expect from this session? It's going to be about a 10-minute PowerPoint intro, just setting the scene as to the why behind what I'm going to try and show. Then hopefully, fingers crossed, an action-packed demo full of level 100 tips and level 200 tools and practices in a frenzied data model cleanup, which will hopefully be some of the how. It's not going to be a detailed how-to. It's going to be to show you some tips and tricks that hopefully you say, I didn't know you could do that. That's going to save me time. Some of these tips I learned as late as yesterday, but it should also give you a taste of some things that you thought about learning that you might go, wow, I'm going to go spend some time with Tabular Editor, best practices, analyzer, and that kind of thing. We're going to be using SQL Server Management Studio, Tabular Editor, external tools, Power Query and Power BI, VS Code, Source Tree, and of course, Power BI Desktop. So it's going to be pretty full on. We'll also be introducing some new external tools that I hope to release to GitHub in BV Mather if there's significant interest. So stay tuned for that. I can't see my header because Zoom is in the way. Bear with me. Gone. All right, so please do get in touch either via email or Twitter if you want to send a vote for something you've seen that you want explained in a detailed how-to blog post. I've just started my first blog and would love to hear what people want to see first. And if you have any PowerShell skills to help bash these external tools into a module for release to the world, and you care a lot about Power BI and some of the limitations of source control, please do give me a shout. Otherwise, just sign up at the blog to stay tuned. All right, for this presentation, a couple of definitions. My data source is going to be SQL, AdventureWorks 2014. It's sitting on Azure SQL. It's a bit of a mission getting it there. I've got a couple of blog posts planned on how that was achieved. Now, the subject of where we're starting is a great report, which is often a single Power BI file, which contains all the data load and transform steps that we see in Power Query. It contains a tabular model with tables, measures, relationships, all of our lovely DAX. And of course, the bits that the user cares about is the visualizations in the report pages. Now, when I'm talking about a data set, and particularly a golden data set, when you publish Power BI to the service, you essentially publish a tabular model into a workspace in the service, and then the reports are shared with the users via an app. Okay, so here we are developing our Power BI Great Report. It's got a bunch of report pages in it. You can see our tabular model. You can see the Power Query steps here. We're connected to our database. All right, we're going to publish that to the Power BI service into a single workspace. Along with it go the report pages, the data set, those Power Query steps. Then we can configure the automatic refresh via a gateway if it happens to be on-premise SQL. And that's going to keep our data up to date. We're going to publish content from that workspace into an app for everyone in the business. Over time, people are going to ask for more reports and more tables and more measures, and more people are going to want to have access to this great report that we've written. So a great Power BI report will often be developed quickly to meet an urgent need. It's going to deliver amazing insights. The business is going to get really excited, and they're going to save a lot of time and effort in collating good quality data. We're going to get this trust to the stakeholders, and people are going to get hungry for more. It's going to lead to some more complexity over time. And that's a pattern that I've seen time and again across many organizations of various sizes. You've got this report, it's a single version of the truth, and the business begins to rely pretty heavily on it. A great Power BI report will always communicate really clearly to the end user through data visualization. That's its reason for being. You can have all sorts of mess in the background from a data set and your transforms and all the rest of it. The users aren't going to care as long as you can keep delivering good quality insights that they can understand quickly, that are intuitive, they're unambiguous, accurate, and trustworthy. All right. But just to really get that message that we're communicating to the end user. A great report requires all the skills of a great analyst and storyteller, choosing the right visuals and measures, the right scales, the color schemes to consider accessibility, and to ensure that your visualizations are not misleading and that they're quick to deliver insight. When we see our role as designers of great reports, our focus is totally on the end user. Now, a good Power BI report can and probably will become a victim of its own success. It's going to become harder to navigate when you've got 10, 20, 30 pages of varying of content on different topics. And you're going to start to get pressure to share different parts of it with different audiences. A data model that's grown organically over time, that you've added to based on, a request or an urgent clarification required on a certain data visualization, it's going to become more difficult to troubleshoot and maintain once you've got more and more dependencies. Quite frankly, Power BI tooling doesn't make it that easy to understand, where are my measures used? What am I going to break? What do I need to check if I change this measure, or I want to clean up which of my measures haven't been used. That kind of thing can be quite painstaking the more complex your solution becomes. Now, the business is going to want content grouped into apps, shared with different audiences, right? So, how are we going to go from our great report to an architecture that supports that kind of sharing without creating multiple Power BI files with different versions of the truth? The accepted architecture is generally referred to as a hub and spoke, where the hub is a golden data set published to the Power BI service, and the spokes are thin reports that contain no data model. Instead, they connect directly to the golden data set in the service. So what's that architecture going to look like in practice? Well, there's our great Power BI report with all of its blue report pages. We're going to strip out those pages and we're going to publish just the data set and the data transforms, the loading steps, into a golden dataset workspace, set up our scheduled refresh. Then we're going to create these thin reports. Now you'll notice that these reports do not have a data model. They're connected to the golden dataset. All right, they're simply containers for great visualizations, right? Now, and we can add a few things like report level measures and so on, but we're going to publish those reports into a collection, a workspace for finance. And we're going to publish that to the users of finance. Then we're going to create another couple of thin reports into a workspace for operations. And so the pattern goes. Now, the dilemma is that the model that we've arrived at this point in time is not necessarily ready to support this architecture. Any changes that we make to the golden data set can break the thin reports, which are no longer part of our single Power BI file. So it can be hard to track the dependencies and you know, have to open all of the thin reports to check that you haven't broken anything if you've made a change to the model. So by switching to this architecture, we've solved the user requirement, but managing or fixing the model can become even more challenging. Ideally, in an ideal world, a hub and spoke architecture, a golden data set, should never break an existing report. Now that's a really mature place to arrive at in terms of your model, and requires some additional technical processes, which we might not have those skills. And frankly, might rely on an underlying data model that's been designed right in the first place. Now, we weren't necessarily focused on building that golden data set at the time. We were building great reports for our users, and now our mindset might need to evolve. So for me, there was a realization. Great report communicates with the users. A golden data set communicates effectively with Power BI report designers through a well-organized tabular model. And that was a bit of a groundbreaking moment for me to understand. I'm not sure I'll design Power BI reports the same way ever again, because I'm going to prevent the buildup of this kind of technical debt, disorganized tabular models. I'm going to deal with that debt with knowledge and process as I develop things into the future. But that doesn't help us now. We've got a big report with a lot of dependencies. It's in production. We can't break anything. We're going to have to get it from the data set that it is now into something that starts to approach a golden data set. So what steps might we take to get there? We're going to try and push the Power Query steps into SQL views to give us greater transparency and control, and data lineage understanding. We're going to develop naming strategies that serve report designers instead of report users. That, again, was a key insight for me. We're going to simplify and declutter the model. We're going to hide unnecessary technical columns. We're going to try and use hierarchies to communicate clearly the relationship between columns that can be drilled down. And we're going to start to organize our measures into a measure table, utilizing display folders to achieve logical grouping instead of overcomplicated naming conventions. The final thing we're going to do is recognize and segregate out nasty little report level measures that are complicated to achieve a particular visual result on a particular report. And we're going to move those to the thin reports, allowing the core model to become simpler to understand. And quick warning, in this demo, you're about to see some open heart Power BI surgery. So I hope you're not too squeamish. without further ado, we will jump into the demo. Benny, can you just let me know, is that all going all right so far? You're still hearing me?
I am still hearing you, yeah. And right now I'm seeing Management Studio and the browser with Power BI in it. So
perfect. All right.
Everything's great. Thank you.
So thank you. Here's our great report in the service. I'm just going to flick a couple of screens here. Okay, here's our great report in the service. The users are happy. They're getting various insights. They're serving up from the app, right? That comes from a single Power BI file, which hopefully many people will be somewhat familiar with. Here, okay. So there's our report pages. Here's our data model with our sales order, date, salesperson, product, resellers, etc. All right. And if we click on the get and transform data, we'll see all of our Power Query steps here. All right. Now, if I have that published to the service and I want to connect a thin report, it's simply a matter of saying get data, drum roll, and typing in Power BI, choosing data set, and choose our data set. And hey, presto, we have access to all of the visible fields and tables that we had in our local model, but you'll notice now that we're not able to access the tables themselves, but we can see our model here with all of our measures and all of our tables and columns, etc. Right? Now, in a disorganized model, we're going to have measures spread out through our different, we've got measures here on the product, we've got measures here on the resellers table, we've got measures on the salesperson, and we've got all of our technical columns and various bits and pieces, kind of confusing the picture for somebody who wants to come and to do a new report. And we can do a better job of communicating with these people by simplifying the model and placing the landmarks for them to understand how to navigate our model. So that's what we're going to try and achieve. All right. Now, I'm going to show you the way I used to do this, right? I knew that I was in SQL Management Studio. I was going to build some really clever SQL query that's going to give me the result that I want. I'm going to paste it in here as a query, and I'm not going to worry about query folding and that kind of thing because I'm not wanting to join directly to the tables. Now, what I didn't realize is that views support query folding, and views are a lot easier to manage in source control. So if we come over here to our AdventureWorks database, and I'm going to script my salesperson view. If we go back to Power BI, we'll see that we're not referencing a view here. We've just got a naked query where we're fetching the data. So I'm going to take that naked query and I am going to paste in the query. If I just do this and comment out that part, run the query, that's what it's going to return. All right. If I now create the view, I'm actually going to alter the view because I think it already exists. All right. Now we have our salesperson view sitting on our database. And if I make a little change to that, let's call that job title. all right, to put a space in. Then when I come over to here, we're going to see our nice Redgate tools let us know that there's actually a change to commit into our source control system. If we can sit and look at our database and we know, we can see the tables and the column names in SQL that are represented in our report, it's much easier to troubleshoot because you're not looking in Power BI and seeing something called a business person ID and over in the view and seeing it as salesperson ID. You want to get a lot of those transforms and renamings and that kind of thing back into your SQL view. All right. So now for a little open heart surgery, we're going to delete the query. We're going to parameterize the server instead of having that hard coded, and the same with the database. And we've broken our query, okay? I'm going to duplicate that query. I'm going to delete these steps, get back to where I can go down to my new salesperson view. I'm going to drill in, and there's the data that we want. All right. Now I'm going to take this part of the query, and now that's effectively the source. I'm going to add this additional step, which is to select a particular row and then drill into the data column. So it's going to select this row and drill into that particular cell, which is going to give me the data that we were looking for. All right. Now we have a bit of a complaint here because I changed the name of a column. I've just pressed refresh data, that has gone away. Now, right click, view native query. I'm seeing that Power BI is sending a native query to SQL that's joining the first name and the last name. And I'm also seeing that it is converting the date to a date format from date time format. So this step that I've got, if we look here and we have our start date, refresh query. Sometimes when you see these red lines, you just need to give it a bit of a kick. There we go. All right, what I'm going to show you is, rather than doing this merging of the first name and the last name in Power Query, I'm going to now push that up into SQL. So I'm just going to do it something like that. And I'm then going to give it the salesperson label. Press F5, come back over here and refresh my preview. And you'll see the first name and the last name should disappear. We have salesperson. Now that merge column step is going to break. I'll delete it. All right. Start date. I don't like the fact that start date hasn't got a gap in it there. So I'm going to go back to my source. And what am I going to do? I'm going to tidy up some of my names here. I want sales, territory, country. Really good practice to have spaces. This is a semantic model that we're building. So we want to show these labels to our users. We don't want spelling mistakes, and we want proper names here. So commission percent. I'm going to say start date. And all right, we have department and group name here. And I know that they're actually employee fields and they're not relevant to what we're trying to do with salespeople here. So I'm going to remove them as part of simplifying my model. All right, back over to here. Let's refresh the preview and see what we broke. Start date wasn't found. Delete, delete, delete. Okay, so now we've got all of the transform steps setting up in SQL, all right? And much easier to see what's going on if we're trying to troubleshoot rather than having to open Power BI files and dig around in Power Query. So I'm going to delete that salesperson duplicate that I just used to fetch my part of the query, and I'm going to close and apply.
So while we're waiting for the close and apply to finish, Brian, I'm going to sneak in a question. If we're having this golden data set, for instance, for all finance reports, do you typically use the import connection mode or DataGrillen to load it? Considering that we probably have large fact tables and several dimension tables. What's your driver to take that decision?
It's very rare. Usually when you're in there at the start, people are dealing with a massive pile of problems that can be solved with, please, just if the data was refreshed as of last night, that would be amazing. It's taking us 3 weeks to generate reports. If we can have it live and up to date within a couple of hours, that's more than enough. And then right at the end, if you identify a couple of very specific use cases that require direct query, then you try and target those directly because then you're not going to complicate your overall architecture and slow up the delivery by trying to address those edge cases.
All right. Does that make sense? Yep, perfectly. Thank you. Yeah, the user was indicating that they initially tried DataGrillen, but that those reports were very slow to function as well.
I stay away from it. I usually convince people they don't need it.
Exactly.
or that we can achieve a lot before we get to that. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
No problem. So I think I'm going to, I'll have a very quick look at the sales order. I don't think I'm going to go into changing that. It's sort of more of the same sorts of processes, except to show maybe a lovely little trick that once you know it, if you didn't know it, you will bash your head on the table. Right, so if I have standard cost here, if I rename that in Power Query, because I want to get these names right, but they're used everywhere. Oh no, I'm going to break everything. So you change it in Power Query, change it in your view in SQL, and then you've got to go fix all your reports. Well, I didn't know this. You rename it here, it fixes all your reports, and it adds a step for you in Power Query. Absolutely fantastic. If you knew that, yeah, you know, it's something you know. If you didn't, it's like, oh no, I've been doing so much work. So if we now go to the sales order table, we can see the rename column, and I can simply jump over into the view in SQL, do the rename there, and delete the rename step here, and we're getting a simpler, more direct set of ETL steps. All right. In terms of your order statuses, this order details table has a column with 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the different order statuses. So I have a little table here where I create a lookup. We could theoretically push that into SQL as well with a case statement. Case when 1, then in process when 2, then approved. It becomes a little more transparent right at the front end. You know, you're trying to troubleshoot while something's wrong, you look over to SQL and you can see all of the transform steps in one place. Okay, we just made a bunch of changes to the file and I forgot to save it. And I wanted to save it in the way it was before I made the changes so that I can go back, because I'm doing open heart surgery here. Now I've got a lovely little tool. If I haven't saved yet, click the button. It's going to go off, listen on the port, find the folder and the file that is open, and I'm going to say, oops, before I did any changes. All right. Now, what I'm not having to do is do file save as here, and go back and reopen and close files and so on. I'm actually just taking a copy of the zip file in the background, You'll see it's been created there, Control Plus. That doesn't work. Sales Insight with the date and the timestamp. Oops, before I did any changes. All right, so now I've covered my tracks. If I want to do another change, bash that off again, I'm just going to leave a trail of the report in different stages that I can open up and recover if I want to. So that's short-term sort of version control, if you like, without constantly having to rename the file that I'm in. So what am I going to do next? I'm going to move. Oh, don't stop the video. Sorry. Organizing measures. All right. Back in the old days, measures should have been on home tables for natural language query Q&A. That limitation was removed, and we are now free, in my mind, to put all of our measures into a metrics table where they're going to be far easier to organize, to find, and to manage the dependencies between. So I'm going to go to the model view. Again, I didn't know you could do this in bulk in the model view. What do I need first? I need a measures table. So I'm going to click Enter Data. And I'm going to call this metrics. It's going to give me a table with an empty column. Eventually, it's going to apply the changes, detecting relationships. I should have turned that off. But
Brian, just to inform you, we're at the we're about a minute over the halfway mark.
Thank you very much. Apply your changes. Yes. I'm going to close the Power Query window here because every time I make a change to my measures, it's going to pop up in the middle and freak me out. So now I'm going to drag those into the metrics table. Doing it in Power BI means that my reports aren't going to break. All right. Now that I have some measures on my metrics table, I'm going to right click on my column 1 and I'm going to say delete from model. It'll give me an error if I have no measures on it before I do that. Now my metrics table is going to turn into a metrics table because it has no columns on it, only has metrics in it. And I'm going to be kind to myself if I can manage to open this. And I'm going to file those measures into a display folder called product with a subfolder of varieties sold to date. Okay. And now we can see that we've got a metrics table with some metrics that are now starting to be filed. So I'm going to drop that into product. Again, I'm going to be kind to my future self and I'm going to file it if I can find the where did they go? Oh dear, they didn't go to the right table. That looks like a bit of a bug in Power BI. So what it did is it put them into a display folder called product on the product table. So I'm going to drag them into the metrics table again. I'm going to highlight those and I'm going to say, I want you in a folder, please. All right. So now, instead of overcomplicating the name of the measure, I can start to communicate to the report developers through the use of subfolders. I am going to take some of my nasty little, are they still highlighted? Yep. Report level measures. Oh, I wish I could get that to somebody tell me the shortcut to collapse everything. I can never remember it. So now collapse. Now I should be able to work. Drag that into metrics. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to start putting things that I want to keep out of my core model. I'm just going to report level and then titles. Okay. Now I'm going to search for the word of with a space, because I know that's going to give me some more measures. Let's go to the sales order table, grab all of those, delete the search, because that will then allow me collapse again, and get all the way down to the ones that I've highlighted, drag them up to the metrics. All the while, none of my reports are breaking with any of these changes, because part of the reason we're having to wait for Power BI to respond here is it's actually going through into the JSON metadata and renaming most of the instances. It's a little bit messy, but okay, so now we're going to stuff those into a sales and quantities, and I've probably overstepped the mark. We've got a couple of sales amounts in there, so sales amount. All right, and I think I've got one more number of sales order. Let's see if it's going to let me drag it. Number of sales orders, sales, let's just pop it into there. Okay, so now I don't have any metrics that are uncategorized, jumping in wherever they feel like alphabetically. They're all nice, neatly organized. And if I go to the next logical extension, I can start to hide fact tables if I need to, because people don't need them. They can just use the measures. All right, I am going to jump to some next level magic. Before I do that, I'm going to click Save. I'm going to hit my next external tool. I'm going to say I want to source control the model. We're going to go connect to the model on the local host, and Tabular Editor is going to export the model into folders for us. Thank you very much, Daniel, for your amazing, incredible tools. So jumping over into VS Code, where I have my source, I'm connected to my Git repository. We're going to have a whole pile of changes there when we moved various measures to various places. I'm not going to go into that in detail, but I am going to stage those and say mass tidy of measures, Control Enter, and I'm going to push that into my source control repository. We'll come back to that, hopefully. All right, now we're going to jump into Tabular Editor. One of my favorite external tools, Power BI Desktop warning. Please do a lot of work to play and break and unbreak any of your models using Tabular Editor to a point where you're comfortable with what works and what doesn't. That effort is really, really worth it. I am going to go to here. I'm going to expand all the tables, Control Right, and I'm only viewing the measures here. I'm going to take, will it let me do more? I'm going to highlight the measures. I'm going to right click, and thanks to the magic of the SQL BI guys, I'm going to bulk format all of my DAX measures, because as we know, if it's not formatted, it's not DAX. I'm going to save those changes to the live Power BI model. And if we look at a single measure to see what we're doing, if I have DAX that's poorly formatted and really hard to read, I can hit the DAX formatter. Theoretically, I've done something wrong there. Let me see if it does it like this. Custom actions, format. Okay, now if I come back to here, not sure why. Let's try committing this and seeing if there's an issue. Yes, I did. I made a mistake somewhere. Let's just call that one and move on. Okay, I can go back to my source control later and figure out what I did wrong there. No, still doesn't like it. I'm going to delete it. All right, I'm going to go to my other measures. I'm going to format those. And last one. So now we have some nice tidy DAX that Marco and Alberto are going to be happy with us. And we've saved those to the model. Now, if I go back here and go to push these to source control, and we'll choose just the model for now. When we flip over into here, we've got the difference engine running. It's going to say we've got loads of changes, but it's going to change its mind. And we'll see that the Dax formatter has put spaces in here. It's just done a little bit of cleanup on my measures. So I'm going to stage all of those changes and formatted my Dax. Okay. The final thing I'll just show you there is I'm going to push the report out into source control. So this is going to unzip the report format. It's the .pbix is a zip file format, and it's going to extract the various components into pages, and it's going to, let me see if I press save. Maybe I don't have any changes. I will just try that again. I did think I added something to. All right, no change there. So, this, we've got a change. So I added a new report page here. Sales by category, we modified the names of some of, look at that. We've modified the names of some of our measures, and that's been reflected through in the references on the report itself. There's a couple of pretty cool things that you can start to look at. You can see which version of the Power BI report, Power BI desktop was used to create this file, for example. If you have custom visuals, they'll be stripped out into source control here so that you can restore them if you need. If you've got themes, they're in source control. So that's a work in progress, but I'm really pleased with the progress on that. So I'm going to say changes to report, and this time I'm actually sending the Power BI file along with those changes. So now if I go over to, this doesn't always synchronize brilliantly. Where is source tree? Source tree. A source tree app. While we wait for that to load, I'll just see if there's anything else. Yes, Tabular Editor. We love Tabular Editor. We are going to run the best practice rules analyzer. As soon as that comes up, I will just close. I have too many instances of it running. I'm just going to reopen that. There's our Tabular Editor. There's our Power BI warning. Okay, I've got 20 best practice analyzer rules. Now I've customized some of these rules. Does Control Plus work? No, I'm sorry. Might be a little bit small. I have a naming convention for anything that is a sort column. Is the name of the column followed by sort in camel case there. I don't want to see those in the model. I don't want to show them to the user. They're technical columns. I'm going to apply a fix to hide those. The foreign key columns on the fact table don't need to be seen. I'm going to apply that fix. And we don't want to summarize visible numeric columns. We don't want people to be able to drag measures on and start making implicit columns on fields and start making implicit measures. So we want to be going into the column tools and setting this to don't summarize for anything that is numeric. Apply fix. Okay, we're going to close best practice analyzer, and we'll come back here and we'll say save those changes. And
Ryan, just to let you know, we're 15 minutes out of the end of the presentation.
Perfect. I'm almost done. So hopefully there's a pile of questions that people can ask. If there's
don't you worry about that. We'll make sure that happens.
All right. So in the reseller email here, I'm going to, I see that I've got a spelling mistake there. And I also see that the account number, I know I haven't used that in a report, and I saw it somewhere else. So I'm going to remove it from the sales order because that's duplicated information. And I'm going to, hopefully I didn't delete the table, did I? No, I didn't. Good. I'm going to rename the email here. Reseller email. And if I want, I can then go over to SQL, change, and in fact, let's do that. Jump over to SQL, find our view for the reseller, script view as altered to. And let's make the same fix there. Find reseller, find email. Maybe we'll find email. Okay, there's our spelling mistake. Okay, commit that. Oh, sorry, not commit it, but we'll execute that. And now if I try and refresh the resellers, I should get an error, I think, because it's trying to rename something that's already been renamed. So let's quickly prove that to ourselves. The nice thing is, okay, so that's correct. We go here and transform data. Transform data, resellers. Now we're just going to go remove that step and close and apply. And the world is okay again. I'm going to show you something else, which is that I can now break my report. Email. I'm going to say email, mail, make it really wrong. I'm going to apply my changes. I might have done too many things at once here. Sometimes if you get an apply changes step that doesn't want to play, then you hit transform data. I'll normally add a column, which I'll usually call delete. Remind me to write a best practice analyzer rule to warn me of those. Oops, one, okay. Close and apply. So the point I'm trying to show here by renaming it again is that when we refresh, when we refresh the data model, this visual is going to break. All right. And I used to think that was the end of the world, except I can actually just rename the measure here. I've forgotten how to fix that, but you can do a trick of renaming it here and renaming it there. I know what it is. We'll rename it back to what it should be here. That'll fix my report. Okay. And then, yeah, but basically, if you apply the fix here at this end, you're going to fix all your reports. I might have had 20 reports with that field on. Okay. Final thing, save. Let's have a look at let's go to source control again. And let's export both the model and the reports. And when we go over here, we're going to see those changes starting to come in, of which there are plenty. And once you work with this for a while, you start to get better at reading what these are. I might have done that in 2 separate steps just to help show what was a change in the report versus what was a change in the model. But we can see here that our files, our columns that have become hidden, we've got a flag that's gone in. So these are all fairly understandable and self-explanatory in terms of changes. And I think with that, just checking my list, I think we're done.
Okay, well, thank you, Brian. That was an excellent session. It was really interesting to see your takes on all this. I do have a few questions for you. One that was asked in the earlier segments of the session as well. When you were digging into building out views, etc., in SQL Server. So in an enterprise level, how do you deal with users, business users, who would like to explore data, but aren't allowed to access a data warehouse or access a SQL database, etc., directly? They can explore data sets, but it's usually limited to what's being exposed for them. What's your tips or guidance to help those users explore potentially other data?
That's one of the reasons of trying to build towards a golden data set, is to build a model that doesn't require the expertise of the analyst. One of the real challenges of having a thin report is that when you look over here, you can't even see what the DAX is. So unless the modeler has communicated in some way, I've written some pretty nasty DAX in some measures, and there's no way I could communicate that. But thankfully, I've started to realize that, a particular specific report like this where, oh, wow, we noticed that a bunch of additional products were sold in this period and we got a boost in sales, but then it tailed off. And so, the business wanted to know which products were first sold in March 2013. That's a nasty looking query. And the idea is to take those types of measures and actually drag them into the report level measures and take them out of the model. So one answer to that is to simplify the model and to make it as accessible as possible. I do quite often get involved in exporting data for various reasons. One is to create snapshots. But if people need an excerpt of the data for their own analysis, I will try and serve them, because it means that I can control that they're getting at least numbers that we know are true. Mm-hmm. And I have a little tool here where if I have a DAX query sitting from DAX Studio sitting in my folder, I'll just edit that in Notepad. Where's Notepad gone? It's just an evaluate statement that generates a data set. You'll see that my external tool has run that query and exported the data from that query with a timestamp. Okay, so beyond that, maybe Power BI Premium and giving people access to some XMLA tools that allow them read. Depends how much data and how transformed it needs to be.
Yeah, okay, thank you. A few more questions for you, definitely. So can you provide an alias or rename fields and columns across many reports, say through something like a lookup list or something similar? The example that they give is industrial data which has nonsense names needing an English equivalent? So renaming across multiple.
Or the names or the data within the field.
Yeah, the names of the fields and the columns across multiple reports.
I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but certainly the job of a data modeler is to translate the nonsense columns into human readable, so that, you know, if you've got a funny old number, that you want to get rid of the database names and put human readable names on top. I think I had, what did I have? I'm reading from an SAP system, and I'm doing something really cool there where I use all of the technical SAP columns, but I've written a function that reads from the SAP dictionary and remaps all of the technical columns with what the SAP system uses in the front end. So in that instance, I'm reading a database of mapping, and I'm dynamically renaming all of the columns. Yes, that's possible in Power Query.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Can report designers add other data sources to this golden data set model?
That's composite modeling. It's an area I've not touched on. I know it's absolutely possible, but I know that if you haven't got your golden data set in order, you're in for a world of pain by adding additional dependencies. But yes, you can. You just Google composite models, and you'll see some early learning in that area. Be careful. That kind of bleeding edge thing, you'll generally get bitten and become an expert in troubleshooting.
The thing with composite models is that at this point, even the Italians, Marco and Alberto, they are still learning it, and it is not an easy thing to grasp fully at this point in time. Yeah, it looks interesting to the future, but it is early. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what I would do in that situation is I would try and work with that person to bring the data into the data set, because probably it's going to benefit somebody else. But yeah, I haven't played too much with composite models.
Okay, so I have another question. You were working on Tabular editor best practices rules.
Yeah.
So typically in your flow when you're working in your model designing, dataset designing, at what stage do you typically start to apply these best practice rules in Tabular editor? Because it can easily, if you get a larger model, it can easily get up to the hundreds of fixes that you may need to apply. And do you have specific priorities on how to start applying them?
The way I view it is, once I define the rule, it's going to help me fix 10 measures or 100 measures. I'm going to learn whether or not there are exceptions to the rule and start struggling with, some of that dynamic link, or some of the language that you've got to learn with that. There's a bit of a learning curve. If you have the rules in place at the beginning, then you'll pick it up as you go. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's certain rules that I ignore for now, like don't use floating points. I haven't quite figured out where I'm going to set the bar on fixing. Should I be rounding at source and all that kind of stuff? So I pick and choose the rules that are going to serve me best. Not sure I really answered that, but.
Well, you did. You actually did answer it. It is a tough question. Most likely to be answered by, and it depends, because it also depends on the way their personal flow is like, or what the flow in their organization is like. But to quote, I think it's Matthew Roach, it's as early as possible and where it makes sense, to some extent.
Yeah. And one of the things I'm trying to communicate here is, you look at all of this best practice guidance about hub and spoke, and you look and you just go, well, that's just going to make it worse. And it's a bit like, well, yeah, I know how to get to Dublin, but I wouldn't start from here. You know, you need to start to map out the processes of how do you make it better, and then learn from your mistakes.
Yep, definitely. Well, making mistakes is a natural part of the process, but it's the way we learn from them that defines us as well, better people.
Yep.
Okay, so to close off, I've had many questions that from people that are dying to know more about your source control tool.
Yes.
So
did any of them say I know PowerShell and how to make modules?
Yeah, no. We did have some people figuring out that it is PowerShell under the covers, but I do strongly suggest you to write up a blog post about it, maybe even a small video, etc., because I do feel that you'll get some interest with this.
Yeah,
definitely.
For sure. Yeah, and if anybody wants to reach out to me on Twitter, bvmather, or at my email address, and I'm struggling to figure out how to represent on the current slide. While I'm there, there's some acknowledgements. I've got lots of my lovely icons from Mark in his GitHub. Accelerator BI, some great intro to Tabular Editor for business users and Tabular Editor themselves. And Melissa Coates and her understanding of why the hub and spoke and checklists on finalizing data models and stuff. There's some really good resources. But yeah, I'd really appreciate people reaching out if they want to know more about that source control, because it's huge once you have it.
Yeah, yeah, I can vouch for that. Definitely, it'll solve some specific problems for many people. Yeah.
Eventually, what I want to be able to do is say, here's a bunch of thin reports, here's a golden data set, and here's all of the places where all the dependencies lie between these, and also here's all the fields that have never been used. And that's a complicated question when you've got to understand, have they been used within the model? Have they been used within reports for filtering or for color, conditional formatting, and so on? And you start wrestling with the internal workings of the Power BI desktop file, and you've got a bit of a death wish if that's what you find interesting, but I do.
Yeah.